You qualify for those exceptions. Each one of those abortion bans that includes exceptions includes strict legal rules for qualifying for the exceptions, rules that are designed to be impossible to comply with. How do you prove to the abortion ban authorities in your state that you were raped? How would you prove to the abortion ban authorities in your state that you were raped by your stepfather?
I've never slept a full night in my entire life. I was 5 years old when my stepfather abused me for the first time. I just felt like I was alone on a planet with a monster. I was 12 when he impregnated me. I just remember thinking, I have to get out of my skin. I can't be me right now. Like, this can't be it. I didn't know what to do. I was a child. I didn't know what it meant to be pregnant at all. But I had options. Because Donald Trump overturned Roe v. Wade, girls and women all over the country have lost the right to choose, even for rape or incest. Donald Trump did this. He took away our freedom.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Hadley Duvall was 5 years old the first time her stepfather abused her. 5 years old. 12 years old when she got pregnant. The abortion ban writers pretend that a 12-year-old could look up the law in her state, find out if there's an exception to the Trump abortion ban for rape and for incest, and then apply for her abortion. Apply where? How? What is she supposed to do? Drive herself to the courthouse? Convince a judge all by herself? How could she possibly do that? How could she convince anyone? Then she drives herself at age 12 to the doctor with a permission slip to get an abortion. And how does a mother who is dying in a hospital bed get to a courthouse to prove to a judge that she's dying so that a doctor can perform a routine D&C after that woman has had a miscarriage? When you're writing an abortion ban with those so-called exceptions, you could leave the enforcement of those exceptions to doctors. Let the doctors assess the patients and decide if they're telling the truth about being raped by a member of their family. Let a doctor decide if the life of a mother is endangered by a pregnancy or a miscarriage. The Republican men who write abortion bans do not trust pregnant women and girls, and they absolutely do not trust doctors about anything. And so they have come up with complex schemes that really mean there are no real exceptions, that the exceptions are just a rhetorical crutch for Republican politicians like Donald Trump. Here's how much Georgia Republicans don't trust doctors. They actually hate doctors, and they put it in writing. The penalty for a doctor who intervenes to save the life of a pregnant woman is 10 years in prison and the loss of their medical license. The ultimate threat to any doctor is the loss of the doctor's license. That's enough. That's enough of a threat to scare a doctor away from doing anything. That penalty, the loss of a medical license, plus 10 years in prison, shows you that Georgia Republicans are trying to terrify doctors and nurses into never trying to serve any kind of medical procedures under these so-called exceptions. The way Georgia doctors and nurses read that law, they were compelled, according to important reporting in ProPublica, to just watch as Amber Nicole Thurman's infection spread after she took an abortion pill that induced a miscarriage. Those doctors felt legally compelled to just watch as her blood pressure dropped. The doctors and nurses watched Amber Nicole Thurman slip toward death for 20 hours because they believed they were handcuffed by the Republican men in Georgia who, like Donald Trump, lie about their concern for protection of the life of mothers. As reported here last night, Amber Nicole Thurman died on the operating table after spending those 20 hours worrying about what would happen to her 6-year-old son. as she felt herself dying. That little boy will someday know the full story of how his mother died and who is responsible, beginning with George W. Bush, who appointed Samuel Alito and John Roberts to the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump, who appointed Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump forgot to tell his Supreme Court justices when he interviewed them for the job that he believes strongly in abortion ban exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother, because those judges forgot to put that in their Supreme Court decision that said Georgia politicians and politicians in any state can do whatever they want to any woman like Amber Nicole Thurman, whatever they want. Republican men in state legislatures and governor's offices can put pregnant women or women trying to recover from a natural miscarriage through any torture they want. That's what the Supreme Court said they can do. The Supreme Court, thanks to George W. Bush and Donald Trump, said that little girls raped by their fathers or their uncles or their babysitters or their stepfathers can be abused by Republican men in state legislatures and Republican governors. Because yes, it is indeed child abuse when Republican men put up qualifying roadblocks that are impossible to get through for a 10-year-old girl to have an abortion to relieve that girl of her rapist's baby. No one in the Republican Party apologized to the 10-year-old girl who had to leave Ohio to get an abortion. There are Republicans who want every rape baby to be born, no matter what the victim of that rape wants or needs to survive. The exceptions are a lie. The Republican legislators who write those fake exceptions in their abortion bans are lying in legislative language. They are abusers of rape victims, second only to the rapists themselves. They are abusers of incest victims. They are abusers of mothers who try to cling to life in hospital beds where Republican politicians have removed the healing tools from the doctor's hands. The only reason we know about Amber Thurman is because the Georgia Department of Health automatically tracks maternal health through the Georgia Maternal Mortality Review Committee. Not every state automatically investigates maternal death, but Georgia does. And that committee found that Amber Nicole Thurman was killed by the law written by the Republican men of the Georgia legislature. The committee didn't put it that way, of course, not in those words, but the committee of doctors did say that she died because her treatment was delayed for 20 hours. It is the law, the Republican law, that delayed her treatment. It was the Republican law that killed her, the law that was possible only because George W. Bush and Donald Trump's appointees to the United States Supreme Court allowed that law to go into writing. They are responsible for another death now, according to reporting by ProPublica today. Candy Miller was 41 years old. She was a mother of 3. By the time she was 41, she had lupus, diabetes, and hypertension. Pregnancy can pose life-threatening risks to lupus patients. Because Candy Miller was living under the Georgia abortion ban, she didn't even consult with a doctor when she ordered abortion pills online from India to terminate her risky, unplanned pregnancy. After taking the abortion pill, which induced a miscarriage, Candy Miller was in intense pain for days, but she never contacted a doctor. Her son, Christian, told ProPublica why. If you get caught trying to do anything to get rid of the baby, you get jail time for that, he said. The Republican men in the Georgia legislature wrote the fear of prison into their law, a fear shared by people who have not read the details of that law, who have not read what the exceptions might be that they might qualify for, but they do correctly know that there is prison written into that law, because that's how much the Republican men of the Georgia legislature want to police the bodies of women in Georgia and police the conduct of doctors and nurses. In the days after her miscarriage, Candy Miller took painkillers to try to stop her excruciating pain. The maternal death rate for mothers with lupus is 20 times higher than mothers without lupus. 20 times higher was a chance Candy Miller didn't want to take. But that would not have qualified as an exception under Georgia's fake life of the mother exception. ProPublica surveyed dozens of doctors in 9 states with abortion bans. None of their hospitals approve abortions for women with high-risk complications like lupus or diabetes unless the patient is already deteriorating and the issue is urgent. Kendi Miller died on November 12th, 2022. ProPublica writes, her husband found her unresponsive in bed, her 3-year-old daughter at her side. An autopsy found that the painkillers she took included fentanyl. Her sister said, quote, she was trying to terminate the pregnancy, not terminate herself. ProPublica reports that the State Committee of Experts in Maternal Health, quote, decided it was preventable and blamed the state's abortion ban, according to members who spoke to ProPublica on the condition of anonymity. Kendi Miller and Amber Thurman died in 2022. The investigations of their deaths were just completed. We're now 2 years later. That's how long it takes from the time of the death to release the information by the investigators about that death. That means there are likely many, many more women in Georgia who have already died, already been killed by the Republican men of the Georgia legislature, but have not yet been reported. The Georgia abortion ban went into effect after the Supreme Court made that possible on July 20th, 2022, and women began dying immediately, according to these reports coming out now. How many died in 2023? We have no idea. It will probably be a larger number than in 2022. How many died in 2024? We won't know probably until 2026. The martyrs persecuted to death by George W. Bush and Donald Trump and the Supreme Court and the Republican legislators are dying in silence. Some of them will speak to us 2 years later from the grave about what happened to them, because their deaths are being investigated very slowly. Those martyrs, like martyrs before them throughout the ages, can change the course of history.
Ours is a fight for the future, and it is a fight for freedom. The freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to live without fear of bigotry and hate, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government telling her what to do. And understand on that last point how we got here. Everyone here knows. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would do just what they did, which is to overturn the protections of Roe v. Wade. And now in more than 20 states, we have a Trump abortion ban, which criminalized healthcare providers. In one state, providing prison for life. You guys may have heard the story, many here, about the stories about the horrendous, most recent stories about what happened in Georgia. Many of these Trump abortion bans that make no exception for rape or incest, it's immoral. It's immoral. And today, 40% of Latinas in America live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. So imagine if she is a working woman. Understand that the majority of women who seek abortion care are mothers. Understand what that means for her. So she's got to now travel to another state. God help her that she has some extra money to pay for that plane ticket. She's got to figure out what to do with her kids.